Here we are, Life in Stages. I'm Joel Greenberg, and we're back in the studio with Mike, who runs everything and makes this podcast possible. And for those who may be joining us for the first time, Life in Stages is a series of weekly conversations with many of Canada's leading theatre, film, television artists. And this morning, we are so pleased to be sitting with Sterling Jarvis. And Sterling and I met a little more than 10 years ago in knowing his career now and having a better sense of what he has been doing in an unlikely project. And rather than have me do all the talking, I'm going to bring Sterling in. Good morning. Hello, Sterling.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Happy to be here with you.
Good. Yeah, no, it's really nice that we could make this happen. And since I was starting to talk about when you and I first met on the project, why don't you explain to our listeners what that project was?
Well, it was a very heavy project called The Overwhelming, which took me in a completely different direction than my career had been at that point, because I was in music theater, doing The Lion King and, shows like that. And then this show came to me, and I remember reading the script and going, oh my God, look, because I couldn't believe, this genocide had happened, and it, it's based on reality and terror and horror of an area in the world that I had never really researched or experienced. You see things on TV and then you kind of go, wow, that's terrible, and then you move on with your life.
Yeah.
Now we're living in it, and it was, I don't know if you felt the same way, Joel, when we were doing it, but I was just like, this is really, really heavy and really, really informative about.
I mean, it was the Rwandan it was a play by American playwright J.T. Rogers, and it was about the preamble, essentially, and the setup for what became the Rwandan genocide. And Studio 180 Theatre, the mandate is social and political theater, and I think that The Overwhelming certainly is about as political as one can imagine getting. And like you, when I certainly knew of the genocide and I remember the events, but when you're working on a project, you do a lot of research in advance, and the play is so well researched. And meeting you then, I mean, it's so interesting now. I knew some of what you had done previously, but we hadn't met. And knowing that you've got this really extensive background in music, musical theater, but singing as a singer as well, apart from theater, and to be handed the very heavy role of a man who represents the Hutu people and their determination to rid themselves of the Tutsi people. It's a hell of a transition from what a circle of life, right?
Hakuna Matata.
Yeah.
It was really for me such a great challenge as well, like as an actor to play a role where you're, this guy is I don't know how well people know the story, but he's pretending to be this really nice guy. And then there's a scene, as you remember, where he just comes out with a machete. And you're just like, so it really challenged me through all of the depth of my experience as an actor. It just covered every aspect of it. So it was wonderful in that way. But I also remember, I don't know if you remember this day in rehearsal where we had a consultant there. Remember him? One point when we were rehearsing that scene where I come up with the machete, he had to get up and walk out of the rehearsal hall because he had it brought back all those memories. That just gives me chills. It gave me chills then. It still gives me
Yeah.
chills to think about it, because I don't know how people survived through that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I remember when we were rehearsing that there were sessions where you and Andre and Audrey, there may have been others who had to learn. There was a degree of Rwandan spoken in the play,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Yeah.
there was, there was coaching, and
Yeah.
and meeting somebody who actually was a survivor. And
Yeah.
that wasn't what we had been looking for. I mean, I don't think that was 10 plus years ago. I don't imagine, you can't Google Rwandan dialect coaching
Right.
in Toronto, right? And we
Yeah.
just happened on him. And it was amazing to be in the room with somebody who knew the story far better than the rest of us.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was just amazed. I just kept looking at this person and going, how did you do that? Like, how did you, people who crawled for days through the jungle and were shot,
Yeah.
still made it. Like, it's just, it was a really incredible experience for me.
Yeah.
And so,
So,
changed
well, let's go back a little bit, because that's
Yeah.
clearly not the beginning of your career.
No.
And you talked about the fact that your background was in musical theater. So when does that begin? When does that part of your life begin?
In music theater?
Well, with music, like in the arts and performing.
Well, I mean, I grew up in a family. My parents always had music playing all the time. They loved playing music. My father and my mother, they taught themselves to play their instruments. So my father played guitar. My mother played piano. Right. But they both were like I remember getting my first guitar and saying, "Hey, Dad, let's play some chords together." And he pulls out his guitar and he plays a chord, and I go, "What chord is that?" And he goes, "I don't know." They would listen and figure it out and just play.
And do you remember roughly or exactly how old you were when that happened?
Well, I was an adult, but like all through my childhood, my parents would play around with their instruments. Right?
Okay.
And but yeah, I was probably in my 20s.
Okay.
Got my first guitar.
Yeah.
But so it was, it was so funny to me. I was like, "Oh, you guys," they go, "No, we don't read music. We just taught ourselves. We just kind of played around." It's kind of like we're from Nova Scotia, so it's kind of like that whole idea of people just getting together, having a party, and bringing out an instrument and just try and play it, and just have some fun.
Okay.
So music was always really positive and fun for me.
Yeah.
Growing up, and then like even in grade school, I was like I wanted to be. I was in the play, like in grade 5, I think, and in the choir in school, in grade school. So music was always part of my life. Yeah. And then we used to go as teenagers. We would go to a place called the Ontario Place Forum, right, which was like a theater in the round in Ontario Place. Yeah, we would go there in the summer and just sit there and watch concerts, which was great because you can be right up next to the artists, and they would come out we would get there early enough, and they would come out to do their sound checks. Yeah. And they're in their regular clothes, and they'll sit there and talk to you. And I was like, "Oh my, this is the coolest thing ever." Yeah. And that was the point when I realized this is what I want to do. Okay. And I actually fast forward, I had a band with my brother and my cousins and stuff, and we ended up playing at the Forum. Great. Which was kind of cool, opening for a group called the Daz Band. And I remember coming down the just to the curtain before you come outside, and there was like 15,000 people there screaming. Like, I hope they remember there's an opening act because I don't want them to be disappointed. And then they were screaming for us when we came out. It was really cool. Oh, that's great. So that just not going back, but so you grew up in Nova Scotia. When did you come to Toronto? I didn't actually grow up in Nova Scotia. I was born there. I see. We came when I was like 2 years old. Oh, okay. So really, I was raised in Toronto. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. But born in Nova Scotia. So, and we would go back every summer for years and years and years. So that was really cool too. Driving 5 kids and my parents in one car
Yeah.
all the way to Nova Scotia and back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
Okay, so moving ahead, like now you're at Ontario Place, and you've just said that being that close to the performers and feeling that you were part of it helped you know this is what you wanted to do. So
Yeah.
how do you go from that to the band you were talking about and to being a performer? How does that transition happen?
Yeah. So at that point, I'm obviously already in the band, and we traveled all across Ontario and played really great venues. But I fell in love with not only the music and performing, but the live aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
the audience and the crowd, and how you can participate with them and get them to feel great, and like, and like, people have asked me, like, what do you like more, like doing film or doing theater? And I go, it's two different things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't say I like one more than the other.
Yeah.
But what I do love about live theater is that it's immediate.
Yeah.
What you can do is you can affect people in incredible ways that you
Mm-hmm.
can't do. I mean, eventually you could do it and film but you're not there with them when they're experiencing it.
Right.
And I love the aspect of, coming off stage, coming backstage, talking to people and finding out how what I just did helped them in some way. I've had people tell me, you just changed my life. I don't know how. And then
Mm-hmm.
they would explain it to me. Like, you just told my story. You just made me. I remember doing a show called Crowns, which is about, Black ladies in the American South,
Mm-hmm.
and the hats they wear and how they adorn their hats, and they do
Yeah.
amazing things with their hats. And this woman from India came up to me after, and she said, you just told my story.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, the story's about Black ladies. And she goes, no, but the story is universal, what you just told me.
Yeah.
She goes, and I haven't spoken to my mom in 6 years. I'm going to go home and call my mom. And I was in tears.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe how you could affect somebody like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just a special thing.
Sure. So how long was it between the time you were with your band and doing a lot of touring before you were involved in a theater specific show?
Good question. I got to a point where, like, the band disbanded because different people in our band took different opportunities and then became like huge artists.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided, okay, well, we tried to hang on, but it's not going to happen. And then I actually ended up doing like a 9 to 5 with a friend of mine, working for him, which was really great. We traveled, did all the, we were selling like lift tables for the auto industry. So I was going into like GM plants and Honda plants and,
Mm-hmm.
and then my wife saw an article. She said, they're doing auditions for The Lion King. And I was like, okay. She goes, you should audition. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not an actor. I'm not I'm not trained. And she goes, no, it says here, no experience necessary. And I was like, well, yeah, but I'm no. She goes, no, you have to go. You have to go do it. Like, you got to try. And I, for weeks, gave her every reason why I shouldn't.
Yeah.
And every time I said, well, what about this? And she'd go, well, then we'll do this. Well, what about that? Well, then we'll do this. And I was running out of reasons not to do it. And I said to my daughter at the time, I think she was like 7.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Aisha, if Dad does this, we won't have our nights where we read our books and we do the airplane and I throw you in the bed, the whole thing. And she went, yeah, but you can take me to school in the morning, Dad. And I was like, oh God. So now I have to go. And that's when I went through like 7 auditions, and it was tough because I'm working with this, like, one of my best friends. I'm his, second, what do they call it? Second man, his
Okay.
right-hand man. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm like, I'm kind of sneaking around, kind of like, hey, I got a dentist appointment and I'm really going to an audition. Hey, I got a doctor's
Yeah.
appointment. And he used to come and watch my shows all the time. So he was like a fan of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it was killing me to do this behind his back. But I'm going, I don't want him to worry if I'm not going to get this thing.
Yeah.
And so 7 auditions. And then they're telling me, hey, go upstairs and go do a movement call. And I'm like, okay. But I don't have an agent at this point. I don't know anything about theater, so I have no idea what the protocol is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go downstairs for your fitting. Okay. And they're measuring me. Literally, it was like 2-hour measurement.
Yeah.
Wardrobe fitting. And I go, what is this for? And the head of wardrobe goes, for your costumes. I go, for what? I go, they go, haven't they told you? I go, no one has said anything to me. No one has said you have the show.
Uh-huh.
I go home. The only contact I have is the casting director. I call her up and I say, hey, can you let me know what's going on? She goes, they love you. They love you. Just don't worry. Like they're trying to find a place for you.
Okay.
2 weeks later, call again. Same thing. They love you. Just be patient. Okay. 2 weeks later, I turn on the news and I see the lead playing Nala being interviewed and they say, so the entire show's been cast and you start rehearsals on Tuesday. And I went, oh my God. And my phone rings and that's the casting agent calling me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was trying to get to you before you saw it. And I was like, I'm never doing this again. There's no, my heart, my heart can't take this. There's no way. And obviously theater doesn't want me and that's fine, but I'm not doing this again.
Yeah.
And so 6 months later, I think she calls me back and she says, hey, Lion King wants to see you. I go, for what? Like, what, to sweep the floors? There's no way. And she goes, no, it's different this time. I go, I'm not doing that. And she goes, no, it's different. They realized they didn't hire enough singer swings. There's just a couple of people that need to hear you sing. It's really simple. Just go in and sing for them and you're good.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And that's how I started in theater.
So it was like between the time you went to your first audition and the time they finally said, we not only love you, but now we want you. That's what, like 6-8 months? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd totally written it off. And it was also very hard to watch, like it's a massive show. So any channel you turn on, Lion King, everywhere you turn, there's huge posters of the Lion King. Yeah. There's buses going by, streetcars with Lion King on it. It was like killing me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, I'll get over this. It'll take a while. So for them to come back and go, hey, you want to go through that again? Yeah. I'm like, no.
Okay. So now you're actually in the show, right? And you're in as a swing, as
singer swing.
Singer, yeah. Okay. And maybe can you explain exactly what that means? Is it the same as an understudy, or in what ways is it different?
It's different. So an understudy will. So if you have a lead character, there would be a person who understudies that character and only that character.
Okay.
That's their job. So if that person gets hurt or that person's on vacation, the understudy will go on for that role.
Yeah.
As a swing, you are learning all of the ensemble roles. So if you see, like in The Lion King, there were 10 men in the show. I had to learn every one of their parts. All of their choreography for each from 1 to 10.
Yeah.
And everything they sing,
right.
Everything they say, everywhere they go. You have to learn everything. Like for me, it was like baptism by fire. Sure. I was like, what? But I thought, in retrospect, because I never went to theater school, I said, I'm going to treat this like my theater school. I'm going to try and learn as much as I can, as fast as I can. I turned to fellow actors because I'm looking around, I'm going, there's a wealth of experience in this show. Like people have done theater for many, many years. And I was like, I'm going to be humble and I'm going to ask them for help, and talk to people and go, can you let me know, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? Yeah. I talked to, my dresser who has probably dressed everybody you can think of and, forgotten more about theater than most people know about theater.
Yeah.
And so I went, I have an opportunity here to learn from amazing people. So, so as a swing, you don't know who you're going to be when you come in. Like literally you come into the theater, you look at the call-in sheet and you go, oh, I'm this person today.
Okay.
I'm that person today. I'm
Oh.
this person today. And so that was I think for me, that was what I needed,
Mm-hmm.
because it gave me a lot of variety and it was exciting. Okay, who am I doing today, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are also days when you are off.
Mm-hmm.
You come in and you're not on. Everybody's in,
Mm-hmm.
so you're just sitting there.
Yeah.
And so what I decided to do was, on my days when I was off, I would go to the head of each department or whoever's working that, automation. Can I sit with you and watch what you do so I can know and learn how what I do affects what you do?
Sure.
I went through every department.
Yeah.
And so many of them said to me, you want to sit with me? And I go, yeah. They go, I've never had an actor ask me. I said, I want to learn as much as I can about this show and theater as I can.
Yeah.
And so everybody was very receptive, lighting,
Mm-hmm.
Stage managers. I'd sit and watch them call a show.
Yeah.
And then I'd see them, they're turning the pages of the script and calling cues for a lighting cue or movement of the rock.
Yeah.
And I realized, oh, if that person doesn't say that line, you're messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Where most actors don't bother to even realize that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like it's a machinery and every part counts. Yeah.
Sure. So having done that and having sort of explored how the show, what makes the show work apart from the people who we see on stage,
Mm-hmm.
what impact has that had on your performing career?
I think I've always really respected it. I mean, I would go to theater and watch shows and go, how did they do that? Like, how, that's amazing. And I always had a love for it, but I never thought of myself being on stage doing it.
Yeah.
So it really, I think that was the biggest impact. It's just going, man, it takes a lot to put a show together. It takes a village, as that saying goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to see the inner works of it. I've always liked seeing how something is built.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes even more than seeing the finished product.
Sure.
I liked seeing how the hell did you put this together?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
sorry. And starting with The Lion King, I mean, you're starting at the top, right? A show that is so automated, and the various design elements are so state of the art and so unique that you're in the world of something that is, in its time when The Lion King first played, one of a kind.
Yeah.
So my question is, taking it back to the overwhelming, when we did it, we didn't have those various resources, as you may recall. Yeah. And I know you've done quite a number of non-mega shows as well.
Yeah.
And you've done them in Toronto theaters that, like Studio 180, have far more limited resources and don't arrive fully formed and are being created as you go. So having done, and how long were you in The Lion King?
I was in there for 3 years.
Wow.
For the final 3 years of the show.
Yeah. And I assume that at some point I assume that you must have graduated from swing to playing a role.
So the second year, when they renewed my contract, they offered me the understudy of Simba.
Okay.
And that's when I really felt like I became an actor.
Mm-hmm.
Because up to that point, even though I'm in a mega musical, I'm singing.
Right.
There was no speaking role for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my jump from singing to acting. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'm like, I need to talk to these guys that are actors in the show and go, can you watch me, and let me know if this is what I'm trying to portray.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me if I reached that goal? And if not, I'm open to you saying, if you'd done this, I would have believed that. And if you've done that, I would have believed that. And then I would adjust.
Okay.
Of course I've got my director too, but I also wanted my friends to talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And they were very open, and they were very helpful.
Hmm.
And so that's when I got the acting bug. I was like, man,
Okay.
I really love telling the story,
Yeah.
you know? Um,
So how when you go from the Lion King to the overwhelming, um, what is it like coming from that machine to
yeah.
something that is anything but?
You know what it is? It was really amazing because I remember when I was in Lion King, a friend of mine gave me some great advice. He said, "This is your first show." And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "You have to realize that you're starting at the top. Like it won't be any bigger than this,
Yeah.
but know that there's going to be amazing projects that you're going to do." And he said to me, "What do you want? What do you want to do for the rest of your career?" I said, I want to be a lead at some point."
Hmm.
And he goes, "Then you have to learn to say the word no." He goes, "Because if people continue to see you as a singer swing, that's all you're going to get.
Hmm.
But if you say no, then you're going to be exposed to many opportunities and doing smaller plays, but plays that are significant." And that's what I felt like when I got into the overwhelming. I was like, "Oh my God, this is wow!" Like it's deep, it's serious, and it's small.
Hmm.
You know, it's not like anything like The Lion King, but it's in some ways more important to
Hmm.
tell this story, you know,
Yeah.
and to see the reaction of people who have gone through it. I was honored to tell their story,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
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 I know that like, I loved my experience with The Lion King,
Mm.
but I knew that if I'm gone, they'd just put somebody else in there, and it's the show is bigger than any person.
Sure.
But I
Sure.
felt like I made a real impact in the overwhelming.
Yeah. I mean, I had an opportunity, in the mid '80s, I guess, of working on a show that arrived. It was a New York show that was being done in Toronto, and arrived with a creative team that had been assigned by the people in New York. So it wasn't on the scale of The Lion King, but the template was pretty familiar. That
Right.
even sitting through that, as as frustrating as I found it, because I realized that I was hired. I wasn't sure at first why I was hired, but I wasn't hired to direct it. I was hired to be the resident director, and I know that each of these big shows has a
Yep.
resident director because the initial creative team puts the show together, gets it up, and then moves on.
Exactly.
And it became clear really early that I, that nobody really wanted to know what I thought about, do you have any ideas? They knew the show was the show was such a success that they weren't looking for feedback of that kind.
Right.
And it began with casting and saying,
Mhm.
we need someone like in New York, we have this, and this is what we're looking for. And
Mhm.
I think I knew that happened, but I'd never been part of that conversation, sort of
Yeah.
eavesdropping more than active. And so it went through the whole process. And
Yeah.
it's true, it was exciting to work on a show where everybody and it was a show with some special effects that were
Mhm.
live special effects. And it was really exciting to see how people had created. It was Little Shop of Horrors. So there was this
Oh, okay.
plant that had to keep getting bigger and bigger. So
Right.
just seeing how it was done was fascinating.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I thought, I don't know. I mean, I am learning something here, but I'm also learning, I think, like when you said the word no, that I don't think this is something I want to do a second time.
Right.
Because I'm not sure that I was pretty sure I'm not the right person to be sort of the supervisor, which is essentially what it is and what it needs. And to show the size of The Lion King, I'd say even more so by
Yeah.
the sheer scale of it. And I think I remember correctly that in The Lion King, there were actors from various parts of the world. So
Yeah.
you had, complicating the whole process is people who arrived with very different ways of approaching the work. And they
Yeah.
had to be convincing as a unit, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. So certainly with the overwhelming and many of the other sort of indie theater shows that you've been involved with,
Mhm.
you've been given the opportunity and the responsibility of creating a character, right, based
Right.
on the material. And there is nobody telling you, this is how it was done in New York or London, and here's the
You
tape.
got to do the same.
Yeah. But that isn't the only large show that you've worked on, right?
Hmm. Well, I mean, I did We Will Rock You in Toronto for almost 3 years.
Yeah.
And then most recently, the Book of Mormon,
Right.
that I toured for 2.5 years through the United States and parts of Canada. And then they took me off the tour and put me on Broadway for another 2.5 years. So yeah, I've been fortunate to do a lot of long running shows.
Yeah.
I remember when my daughter was young, she goes, Dad, you're always working. You're always, and I was like, well, I've like when I said, I can't remember how old she was, maybe 13, because I had done We Will Rock You at that point. She goes, you always get work. You're always, I go, sweetie, I've done like 2 shows, but they just been a long running,
Yeah.
So because she's now in the business too, but that was the time when she was thinking about, getting into music theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've worked, I mean, your professional relationship with your daughter is also interesting.
Yeah. I remember when she was going into high school, she wanted to audition for ESA, Atypical School of the Arts. And at that point she'd been, when she was 4 years old, we put her in ballet to see if she liked it. And then she liked it. And then she wanted to do jazz and she wanted to do tap and she wanted to,
Yeah.
So we had to make a deal with the director of her ballet school. Can we do a package deal? Because this is getting really expensive.
Yeah.
And so I just assumed that she was going to go in and audition, because at that time they did auditions for dance. And she went, Dad, I want to go into music theater. And I was like, well, I have to get you a vocal coach then. And she said, Dad, would you be my vocal coach? And I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, crying and the whole thing. And then I went, okay, we need to buckle down because we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
And then she went in for her audition, which was like 6 hours long.
Wow.
Came back out in tears. And I was like, what happened? You were so prepared. And she goes, no, Dad, these are tears of joy. Like, this is my school.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm going, it's an audition, honey. We don't know if it's your school yet. And then she got in.
Yeah.
And then when she finished high school, she wanted to go to Sheridan. Same thing. Dad, would you coach me? Absolutely. But I knew at that point I'd already been asked to do workshops for kids that were already in Sheridan. So I knew the level that she needed to be at, and she was already well above that level.
Yeah.
So I was so calm. My wife was not calm before the auditions, but I went, she's in. There's no way she's not in. And then she got in.
Yeah.
And then further down the road, I did a one-man show. And I said to her, would you be interested in doing like a tap number and then sort of joining me at the end of the show? And she said, absolutely. Right. So I sang Mr. Bojangles and she did a tap number in sort of silhouette so people couldn't recognize who she was. And then she came back out at the end and we did duets and ended the show. So it was really cool to actually work with her.
Sure.
Not only helping her develop herself as an artist, but, being on stage with her and working through a show.
Yeah.
So we kind of put this show together.
Yeah.
And now we live together. Like, our house is divided into 2 apartments. So it's amazing because it's like, hey, I have an audition. Come up and read for me. She goes, Dad, can you come down and, read for me for this? So it's really cool, like having 2 actors in the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's really great. Very, very, very proud of her. And I just found out, well, she just got married. And she found out as she was going on her honeymoon that she just booked a contract at Stratford.
That's fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're very excited for her. Very excited. Yeah.
That is, it, I assume that working with your daughter,
Mhm.
uh, probably fair to say it wasn't something that you may have considered when she was really young.
Hmm.
Um, and the opportunity of you being able to work together is well, it certainly is unique, and
Mhm.
likely is reward fulfilling for both of you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny that you say, um, might have been something I didn't think of. I actually thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
Once she decided that she wanted to do this, we actually both said, maybe
Mm-hmm.
one day we'll do something together. That would
Yeah,
be so cool,
yeah,
you know? And she's auditioned for show, like she auditioned for the Book of Mormon when I was in it.
okay,
I was like, wouldn't that
yeah,
be cool,
yeah,
if you got it? But she didn't, obviously. But um, yeah, to be together with her, I remember just looking across at her and just going, this is the greatest thing ever.
yeah. Well,
Just because she's such a great kid. I
yeah,
mean, I know a lot of people say that about their kids, but
yeah.
she's just such a great human being.
Mm-hmm.
And for her to, because she could have easily said, no, Dad, I don't want to. I don't want to do that. That's too uncomfortable. She was like,
Yeah,
yeah, let's do it.
yeah,
So we know one day we're going to be in a show, like a show
yeah.
together somehow. It'll happen.
Okay.
We'll just wait and see.
Yeah. Now
Yeah.
you mentioned that after you were touring in Book of Mormon, you were then on Broadway, and you were on
Yeah.
Broadway for, you said, a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how is uh, I don't know if there's a point of comparison if doing a show in one location is different than doing it somewhere else, but is working on Broadway markedly different in any way than working in Toronto in a large theater?
Hmm. Well, the theater that I worked, well, I shouldn't say the theater. Like Lion King, for instance, the Princess of Wales Theater is 2,000 plus seats.
Yeah.
The theater in New York and most theaters, um, except for maybe the theater where the Lion King is playing in New York,
Mm-hmm.
most of them are really small
Mm-hmm.
and also really old.
Yeah.
So like there's like the theater we were in New York, my dressing room was on the fifth floor and there are no elevators.
Right.
So costume changes were like, it was like an aerobics event.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So it's in that ways it's different. Um, I don't know if there's a difference in the audiences. I don't feel like there is a difference.
Mm-hmm.
People love a show. They love a show,
Mm-hmm.
like when we were in Toronto doing We Will Rock You, um, in a, we did it in a big theater and then moved it to a smaller theater.
Yeah.
But, there were people that came to that show 50 plus times.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with the Book of Mormon. So I don't feel like the audiences are different. I think it's just the locations and the
Yeah.
circumstances. Like you're in New York, you're standing at your theater and you can look around and see 7 different theaters
Mm-hmm.
within, a glance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you walk around the corner and there's like 20 more.
Yeah.
I think that's the big difference. Here we have a limited number of theaters and they're sort of spread apart.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
but how does that, what impact does that have on you? Like emotionally, what is it like? Say, I'm on Broadway. Is that a feeling? Is it?
It is. I never, as a performer, that was never on my radar.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, come through theater schools and go, I got to get to Broadway. I got to get to Broadway. Maybe it's because I never went to theater school.
Mm-hmm.
So it was never, I just loved to perform
Yeah.
and I loved whatever I was doing, wherever I was doing it.
Yeah.
When they gave me, the tour, and it's a Broadway tour. So I went, okay, this is my Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they took me off the tour to put me on Broadway, there was a visceral reaction. I think for me, when I could tell my family,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to Broadway.
Yep.
especially my mom. She was like, what? And then to see my name on a marquee
Mm-hmm.
as one of the five principals and one of the biggest shows in the world,
Yep.
there's an effect that happens to you. You just kind of go, oh man, I might have just made it.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine it being for theater, for music theater, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
bigger than this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, there was a sense of pride and a sense of you did good, man. You did,
Yeah.
without even intending to get to Broadway, you got to Broadway.
Right. Right. And you're living in New York at that point, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how does that? How do you find room for a personal life? And how does a family, when you're doing the moving and they're not, what does that do to the, I guess, the texture of the composition of the family?
Well, thankfully, my wife quit her job and came and lived with me in New York
Okay.
because I don't think I could have done it alone.
Yeah.
I couldn't be separated from, because on the tour I've done it enough.
Mm-hmm.
They would come and visit, which was amazing, but I'd have anxiety when they're coming because I'm thinking about them leaving.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember doing a show in Winnipeg. It was the first time I ever went on tour. And my wife and my daughter came out and visited in the middle of my run,
Mm-hmm.
and they went home, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
So I said, the next time we do this, you got to come at the end of the run so we can all go home together.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it really affected me in that way. Thankfully, my wife was with me, but we still had our daughter here,
Mm-hmm.
my mother here, my family, my sister, so eventually you start to miss them.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you're in a massive show and you're getting standing ovations every night,
Mm-hmm.
there's a part of you, if you are a family person, that misses them, and you kind of go, okay, I might have to stop.
Yeah.
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 But yeah, that was the only thing. I mean, the other side of it is you're in the mecca of music theater, like, or theater,
Yeah.
like, so that's amazing. But at the same time, doing 8 shows a week in a Broadway show, for me anyway, was exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd come home and I would just want to sleep. And then on my day off, we would just kind of hang out because you have to recharge your batteries and get ready for another 8 shows.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Try to do stuff during the day. That's fun. We would go golfing and stuff like that. But like during the week, but you've got to make sure you have enough energy to do a high energy show like that.
Yeah. And you were also, I think you were there when everything shut down in March of 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was crazy. We started looking at, when they went from, you can only congregate this many people,
Right.
1,000. Then it went down to 750. Then it went down to 500. We were still at capacity.
Yeah.
And I said, how are we doing this? Why wouldn't they tell us we have to? And then it went down to 250. And then I remember being at the apartment, getting ready to go down. Stage manager calls me and says, Sterling, where are you? And I was like, I'm not late. Like, why are you asking me where I am?
Yeah.
They're going, no, where are you? I said, I'm at the apartment. Stay there. Why? We're shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
I go, the show's shutting down? And she goes, no, Broadway's shutting down.
Yeah.
And it was like a punch in the gut. Yeah. So we're thinking, okay, we have a lease. This is March.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lease until August.
Okay.
And at that time, there was very little information about COVID. So we're like, this is probably going to last a couple of months,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll be back at it again.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we know that wasn't the case. But at the time, we're like, okay, we're just going to hang out in the apartment, order food and, groceries and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And at one point, my company manager calls me and he says, Sterling, listen, immigration has called me. And I go, yeah, and you have to leave the country. I was like, what? Yeah, because you're here on a work visa and obviously there's no work.
Right.
So you have to go. I was like, when? They're giving you a month to leave. And we're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So we were like, we're going to come back. So we are going to pay the lease because I know a lot of people just left and didn't, honor their leases.
Uh-huh.
They just left.
Yeah.
I said, we're not going to do that because we're coming back. So we ended up paying, I don't know, it was like an extra $12,000, but we put everything in storage in New York
Mm-hmm.
as we knew we were coming back.
Right.
But then when we came back, we found another apartment, beautiful 2-bedroom apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So we call up the storage company and say, hey, can we get our furniture and everything now? We got an apartment. They go, well, you can, but it's going to take 3 weeks. And we're looking around in this empty apartment going, what are we going to do? Where are we going to sleep? And so we ended up going, okay, let's just go buy a bed. It's a 2-bedroom. And, and it was like, we tried to make fun. It was kind of like camping,
Right. Yeah.
folding chairs and, paper plates and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. And then coming back, it was completely different because now everybody's masked.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting tested every single day.
Right.
We finally got to an opening night. And so what you would do is you'd go to a clinic, get tested. They would send the results to the stage door. You're standing outside, and then the stage manager would go, okay, you're good. Come in.
Oh, God.
I come in, I go upstairs. This is opening night, right?
Mm-hmm.
My family's there. And I'm getting ready. And then they come to me and go, Sterling, you tested positive. It's like, what? You just said I was negative. Can you go back to the clinic and test it again? So now I have to change back. I'm running downstairs and they stop me at the stage. Oh, sorry, stop. We tested it again. You're okay. It's like, oh, you guys are killing me. So all of these experiences are completely different.
Yeah.
And I realized a lot about myself as an actor and the things that I love to see when I'm doing live theater. I love to see the faces of people when you can see them. Sometimes it's a couple of rows, but I rely on that. I feed off of that. And I'm, even with the Book of Mormon, there's, stuff that I had to sing that was not, let's just say I could in one song say every profanity that you can think of, right?
Yeah.
Some people were in the aisles rolling and laughing, and others people were looking offended. Mm-hmm. And so I would look at that person and go, I'm gonna win you over by the end of the night. So I realized with you have a mask on, you don't see any of that.
Yeah.
And then what I used to love to do is doing talkbacks.
Mm-hmm.
They cut all of that.
Right.
I love doing backstage tours, cut all of that. Yeah. I love doing the stage door and talking to the fans. They cut all of that. So everything was completely upside down for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really was. It was a wild time.
So when you went back, when things were starting to open up, and you and your wife were back in New York, how long were you there? How much longer were you with the Book of Mormon?
I think it was probably another year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah.
So why did you leave?
I felt like there was a point where, because I said to my agent, listen, you know what? I can do like voiceovers.
Uh-huh.
And she was like, no, you're not allowed. I was like, what? Well, can I do commercials? I couldn't do that. I think that was the point where I realized I couldn't do anything but the Book of Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, this has been almost 6 years. I've played this role. I think I've done a good job in this role, and I don't know what else I can do with this role that's different. It's like you were saying, there's certain parameters. When something is like a machine, it's like, we'd like to keep it like this.
Yeah.
And I think it started to affect me. The realization that I have a friend who was in the show with me, and he was in my dressing room with me, dressing room mate, and I would help him audition for shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Law and Order in the States, things like that.
Sure.
And he would look at the scene and go, man, you'd be perfect for this. You, and I like, yeah, but I can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that whole idea of, that feeling of I can't, or I'm not allowed.
Yeah.
And he turned to me and he said, you feel stuck. And I never thought of it that way until he said it to me. He goes, I know what you're feeling. Cause I was like, I don't know what I'm feeling. I'm getting, anxious. And he says, you feel stuck. Mm-hmm. And it was at that point I went, yeah, I feel stuck. And that was the point where I realized, I have to go. And I missed home. I missed family. Like my wife and she couldn't work.
Right.
right? So she made a joke one time. She goes, "There's only so much cleaning I can do of this apartment."
Yeah. Yeah.
And cooking. And I felt bad for her, because she's a businesswoman. She needs to be working.
Mm-hmm.
And then we both felt like we miss our friends. Like we can't have parties and go to birthdays and all of these things
Yeah.
because we're here.
Yeah.
So it just became like, this has been an amazing, amazing, amazing experience,
Mm-hmm.
but it's come to an end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you've spent a considerable amount of your career in a limited number of shows, as you said, in long running shows, which is a whole other discipline.
Absolutely.
I don't know what the show might be, but if something else came along, are you still interested in doing something that could have such a long life?
Yeah, but I don't know if I would do it for as long.
Right.
Yeah. Somebody asked me this just yesterday. We had some friends here, and an actor who I did the tour with,
Mm-hmm.
who happened to be in Toronto, and we got together at our house, and his wife asked me that, would you want to go back to 8 shows a week and a long run?
Yeah.
And I said, I think after doing what I did, and it was a great experience doing a long tour like that, I think I would do it, but for a shorter amount of time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you still? I mean, that was a couple of years ago, right? When you moved back from New York.
Yeah.
And I know you've been working on many projects since. Do you still do concert, sort of straight ahead singing, or is everything now directed to theater?
No, actually, I'm in November doing a concert with 5 other singers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's funny because that's where I started, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever stop doing concerts.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a different discipline and a different feeling, but still in front of a live audience.
Right.
Still telling stories through songs. Yeah.
And do you self-produce, or do you wait for people to contact you or invite you to do things? Is it a combination of both?
Yeah, I don't self-produce. I've been lucky enough, I guess, and worked with enough people that they'll get in touch with me and ask me to do projects.
Mm-hmm.
I have a songwriter that I've worked with for over 20 years. I did the theme for a show called, I sang the theme for a show called Zaboomafoo. It was kind of funny because, I do talkbacks, and kids would say to me, "So tell me stuff that you've done."
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell them about a movie I've done with major actors or whatever, TV series. And they go, "Oh, that's cool." And then when I talk to them about Zaboomafoo, they lose their minds. They're like, "Oh my God, I grew up on that."
Yeah.
So the person that wrote that theme is one of my best friends, and we do songwriting together.
Mm-hmm.
And he's trying to produce a musical based on the songs that we've created. So
okay,
I guess that's kind of the most producing that I've done.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see what that happens.
And I mean, because your career has been, it's so eclectic, right? Without formal training.
Yeah.
And that's not unusual, but it is unusual, from my experience, with the various styles in which you've worked, the various platforms.
Mm-hmm.
If you're meeting somebody now, I don't know that it would be your daughter when she was younger, but and you say that you've done workshops and talkbacks, and I know how much you enjoy doing that. What advice would you give advice, and if so, what would you say to somebody who saw you in something and had the same reaction, perhaps, that you'd had when you were at Ontario Place, where you say, I know this is what I want to do.
Right. Sorry, what's the
Well,
question?
I don't know
What?
if do you have any advice for what you would offer that person?
Oh, um, I would, because I've answered this question directly to kids. What
Okay.
advice would you give me? And
Yeah.
I said to them, learn as much as you can. My road is unique, and I was very lucky.
Yeah.
But if I could go back, I remember when my daughter, they had orientation at Sheridan, and they
Hmm.
invite their parents to see the curriculum,
Right.
and they're studying piano. They're studying, of course, acting, singing, dancing.
Mm-hmm.
They're also studying, how to do your taxes. Because if you're getting into this world,
Mm-hmm.
you have to understand that, like if you're getting an agent and they're taking a percentage, you need to know what that percentage is and how it affects your income.
Right.
You know, so I would say to them, this is a real world. This is a job,
Mm-hmm.
not like fun and games. You have to learn every aspect of it, learn as much as you can, pick everyone's brain,
Yeah.
and be humble. I remember saying to one person, if you get into a show, if you are so self-centered that you can only think of yourself, think of one other person, your dresser, because that person has a wealth of knowledge that if you're willing to ask them questions, they will educate you in a way that you will never get in school.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not your maid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be polite.
Mm-hmm.
Say please and thank you. Show up on time. And on time means early. It doesn't mean
Right.
if your time is 1 and you show up at 1. Show up early.
Mm-hmm.
Be prepared and be ready to go. I remember talking to at a workshop, and there was a girl that came in. Like we were in Crowns, me and another actor.
Mm-hmm.
We came to their show to talk to their school to talk to them about acting because supposedly all of these kids wanted to be actors and performers. And this one girl came in late, and I'm looking at her, and I'm just like, and then she fell asleep. I was like, and then we did the show, and they came and we did a talk back after. And she came up to me and she said, "This is so great. I really want to be an actor." And I said, "Really? Because you came in late and you fell asleep." So I had a long talk with her, and I said, you first of all need to apologize to your teacher because she arranged this for us. 2 days later, the teacher came to me and said, what did you say to her? I said, I just told her the truth. Like, you're disrespectful. And that reputation is it's going to, if a director, and maybe you can answer this question, Joel, but I assume if a director is looking at two people who are equally qualified, and one of them comes with a reputation of being a jerk or being late all the time, and the other one is like on time and very respectful, I think if I was directing, I would pick the other person because it's just too much of a hassle. So those are the kind of the things that I would tell young kids. Like, it's just simple. Like, supposedly your parents raise you to say please and thank you and be respectful to other people. That goes a long, long way. And sometimes when you are up against another person for an audition, that will be the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would tell them those kinds of things. And I think it would surprise them because I'm not talking just about acting. I'm talking about being a decent human being.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that will take you along a long path because people will want to work with you, and people will be calling other people, where can I find this person? Because I want this person to be in my project.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the word of mouth is invaluable.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a really ideal place to say thank you.
Wonderful.
It's not only excellent advice. I mean, it's great advice, and you have to hope that when that's being offered to somebody who's at the beginning of a career, and focused on themselves, which is what is so much a part of the early stages of anybody's career, that you're able to say. I mean, it's encouraging to know that this particular student who you spoke to actually was listening to you, and had the space to absorb what you were saying and to acknowledge it. So that's a success. That's great. Thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time for us to get to know you so much better, Sterling.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And to all of you who are listening, thank you for joining us. And I encourage you to tell all your friends and anybody you meet about Life in Stages to follow us. And you can write a review if you if you think that's helpful. And you also, I'd like to bring to your attention that you can help support the running of this podcast by going to patreon.com, patreon.com/lifeinstages, and support at any level is deeply appreciated. Thanks again, and look forward to our next episode. Bye-bye.